Money Radio, discussing the business of making and spending money.
Hello, you're welcome to today's edition of Money Radio on Leadership Podcast. Money Radio brings you the latest developments in Nigeria's business and economy cycles and issues of businesses around the world. My name is Innocent Odo, and in today's edition, we're going to look at something very critical to the survival of Nigeria and other West African countries, and that is the quest by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, to avert the looming crisis facing the sub-region. And so today we're going to look at why and how the regional bloc is facing this kind of crisis and the efforts being made by the regional bloc to avert the crisis in this particular sub-region of West Africa. I am not alone in the studio. I am here with Kes Hammond. Kes, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure being here.
Now, Kes, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, they are having a first ordinary session going on right now in Abuja. And one of the major items they are looking at is the issue of how to ensure food security to the regional citizens. And of course, you know that in the past couple of years, there have been this instability in the sub-region, political instability, economic disarticulation, insecurity, of course, threatening most parts of West Africa, especially Nigeria. Talking about terrorism that has ravaged parts of the country and on some other countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and even Niger. So the continent are trying to mobilize what they call financial resources to be able to avert the looming crisis. Do you think that this move will make any significant impact?
Well, I can't say at the moment how much of an impact it will make, but I think it's better trying than just sitting and allowing the situation to engulf us and leave us in a starving situation, a situation where a whole economic bloc will be starving. Although when we talk about food security, it's not peculiar to West Africa. It's something that is beginning to affect virtually every part of the world. Um, it has been, you may call it, a double whammy, starting from COVID-19, which we experienced in 2020. Economies went on lockdown, major economies, and not just major economies that
around the world.
Yes, around the world actually went on lockdown. In fact, as we speak, China, especially that province of Wuhan, yes, the coronavirus is still ravaging that area, and that place is still under lockdown even as we speak. So, not only that, it put people there, the COVID-19 pandemic put people out of work. It also caused supply chain disruptions, and that's why we have situations where our farmers getting fertilizers and sort of other implements to do farming is becoming a little bit, it's a challenge. Coupled with the fact that this needless war in Ukraine has caused food distribution disruption. Yes. Russia and Ukraine jointly contribute like 40% of the world's wheat grains. Not just wheat, we were talking about corn and other grains that feed the world. That's why Ukraine is actually referred to as the food basket of the world. Yes. Being the food basket of the world, a part of Ukraine, in fact, the port, especially the port city of Odessa and some other ports in Ukraine, are actually being bombarded daily. In fact, there is a blockade by Russia, and that's why most countries in the world are accusing Russia of causing artificial food crisis. Now, coupled with all of that, Ukraine is a major producer of fertilizers also in the world. So when you put all of this together, the world is a global village. The world being a global village, take for example, wheat is the main ingredient of flour, which we use to make bread.
Yes. And many other things.
And many other things. In the absence of wheat, you find that the world's population will have to, because bread is a global staple.
Yes.
In the absence of bread, in the absence or the shortage of bread, you find that people will have to make alternatives. So instead of feasting on bread only, which we eat bread in this part of the world so much, but we are actually a minor consumer of flour or wheat or bread compared to to Northern Africa and the Middle East. Those ones, bread is their food. So when you have the shortage of wheat, which which constitutes the major component of bread, when you have that shortage, people tend to look for food, other forms of food or other types of food, which they may not be used to, and going to get other foods like it may be cassava, it may be rice. You create a shortage in the supply, or you create a shortage in the supply of rice. Shortage in the sense that more people are going for rice since there is less bread available. So more people are going for rice. More people are going for other products which are available, and as a result of that, you cause a shortage in the supply of food. Now, let's come back to West Africa.
West Africa, especially
Yes.
Nigeria.
Especially
because
Nigeria.
we're the biggest in West Africa,
Yes.
the most populous in West Africa, and indeed the whole of Africa.
Exactly. The situation here is even worse. In West Africa right now, out of, or say ECOWAS, out of the 16 countries, 12 are in a, you can say, stable democracy, but 4 are actually having a problem. 4 of the countries in West Africa, including Nigeria, because many people, because of the security situation, are finding it difficult to go out to farm. That is food shortage. Of course, Nigeria produces like 75% of the world's yam.
Yes.
So when you find people, farmers, not being able to go out to the field to produce yam, it creates a shortage, and that creates a problem in the sub-region, this economic region.
Okay, we're about to join, we're being joined by Paul Wadima online. Paul, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. We're talking about a request by the ECOWAS to avert looming food crisis in the country. It is said by the legislators at the ECOWAS Parliament that nearly 20% of the regional citizens will face real crisis of food insecurity in the coming months. And so they are actually trying to mobilize what they call financial resources to be able to counter this threat that is coming on all of us in the sub-region. And so, but the modalities and the extent to which these particular efforts are being made can take us to ensure that we address this crisis is what we're interrogating. What is your opinion on that, Paul?
Thank you for having me once again. The truth of the matter is that for the past 3 years, there has been consecutive 3 years of food scarcity in West Africa. This has been of concern to West African leaders, including Nigeria. And this is basically because there are factors, multiple of factors that made this situation, why West Africa is having this challenge and why Nigeria is also having this challenge of food shortage. One of the major challenges is the climate factor. West Africa is not immune from the crisis of climate change, which is as a result of change in harvesting season, change in rainfall pattern, which has affected the growth of agricultural produce in the sub-region, which has also affected ability and the capacity of farmers to be able to produce enough food to feed the sub-region, and in the case of Nigeria, to feed the country. This is just part of it, the climate change. Other factors you have to also look at is the issue of insecurity in West African sub-region. The insecurity in West African sub-region has led to farmers not being able to concentrate in farm work, in farmers not having access to their farmlands. Now, this has reduced the number of farmers in the region who can contribute to the food basket of the sub-region. And as I'm talking about the sub-region, I'm also talking about Nigeria. You and I know what the menace of headers farmers crisis has caused to this country. A lot of farmlands in this country are not accessible by farmers. They are not accessible by those who produce the foods that we all eat in this country and in the sub-region. Then also don't forget, we have also had the crisis of the COVID-19. The COVID-19 also impacted the agricultural sector in so many ways. If you recall, during the time of COVID-19, there was virtually total lockdown all over the world. Farmers, even those who want to go to the farm, could not have access to fertilizer, which are imported from other parts of the world. So these are some of the reasons why this problem has persisted and why the thing is not abating, even though we are in 2022, when we should have done better. As I told you, West Africa have been experiencing continuous scarcity of food for the past 3 years. Now, many thought that by now we could have come out of it, but we have not been able to do that. And like Case also pointed out to you there, the issue of wheat that are being imported from outside the continent or the sub-region is no longer available as it used to be because of the war in Ukraine. So there is a multifaceted reasons. There are multifaceted reasons why West Africa is having this serious challenge, and it's an issue that needs to be addressed at the micro and macro level. By micro, I'm talking about like Nigeria itself. About macro, I'm talking about as a sub-regional issue to be addressed.
Okay, Paul, still remaining with you. You mentioned the issue of insecurity across West African countries, and to be specific in Nigeria, the country is also facing this real threat. Now, the issue is that the continental body like ECOWAS and even the allied regional organizations probably have not been able to address this crisis of insecurity because at the chambers of today at the chambers of the ECOWAS Parliament, the issue has been, why is it that the insecurity keeps increasing despite all the effort that have been made? So if they are going to mobilize resources to avert food crisis and the issue of insecurity is not tackled, in what way do you think this will help in any way to lift the sub-region from this kind of crisis?
The insecurity needs to be tackled, and it needs to be tackled fast. If I may remind listeners and those watching us, if you look at series of coups in West Africa in recent time, if you look at most of the coups taking place in West Africa recently, it is linked to poverty. And this poverty is exacerbated by the fact that farmers cannot have access to their farms. Poverty, when farmers don't have access to their farmlands in a sub-region that is predominantly agrarian, it's a recipe for crisis. It leads to political instability, which is what we are witnessing in West African sub-region. If you look at most of the military coups taking place in Africa right now, they appear to be restricted mostly to West Africa. And what are the reasons for it? The inability of West African leaders to address the issue of insecurity and food crisis and the increasing poverty in the sub-region. That is the major issue. Now, what can we do about it? What can the sub-region do about it? At several occasions when I have to address this issue, I have said we must begin to implement the Maputo Declaration on funding of agriculture in the sub-region, in Africa in general. West Africa has to embrace the Maputo Declaration of 2003, in which West African or African countries in general were expected to leave at least 10% of their annual budgets for agricultural production. This is what needs to be done. Since 2003 till now, many West African countries have not been able to meet up to this target of allocating 10% of their annual budget to the agricultural sector. I think that is at the root of this food crisis, because I know, don't forget, during the COVID-19, I mentioned that COVID-19 was one of the reasons why West Africa is facing this problem. During the COVID-19, don't forget that Nigeria did not have access to foreign rice, but we were eating foreign rice. We were eating local rice in this country. Why? Okay. Because of what President Muhammad Buhari did in the agricultural sector, by ensuring the growth of rice in Africa, in Nigeria in particular.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I will continue with the discussion, please.
For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.
Money Radio, discussing the business of making and spending money.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we have been talking about the quest by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, to avert looming food crisis in the West African sub-region. I've been in the studio with Kes Hammond, talking about how to address this crisis and the options before the regional bloc. And also we've been joined by Paul Owadema virtually, talking about the same issue. Now, Kes, I turn it over to you. The crisis you mentioned earlier, the crisis of multiple dimensions, yes. And now they have a real challenge of trying to sort them out. Talk about the COVID-19 disruptions that we're trying to actually find a way out of it. And then the disruption actually caused economic downturns, especially African countries who are not technologically advanced, and of course have not deployed those kind of capacities to be able to extricate themselves from the entanglements of this real challenge. Now, the basic issue here is that about 5.5 million Africans are said to have been displaced. West Africans are said to have been displaced in the last couple of years as a result of this crisis, and that's an increase from last year. Last year it was 4.4 million. Now it has increased to 5.5 million. Now, this is a record from the ECOWAS, the president of the ECOWAS Commission, Jean-Claude Cassibrou, in his presentation today on the floor of the ECOWAS Parliament. Now, this is very scary. And there's no prospect that the problem is abated. So how then do we, of all this effort we're making, if we're not able to stop humanitarian crisis from happening, displacement from happening, and you've got a decreasing level of terrorism ravaging West Africa?
Bear in mind, these people, these 5.5 million you are mentioning, are mainly people who have been tilling the soil.
Yes.
These are farmers. So by displacing them, you not only create mouths to feed, mouths that are not producing, because once these people are out as refugees or in displaced people's camps, they are not working, they don't produce, and so you create mouths to feed, whereas they are the ones who have been feeding the country.
Yes.
And it happens in Nigeria, it's happening in Mali, it's happening in Burkina Faso, and pockets of other situations in other places. So this is a real problem, and that's why this ECOWAS, this summit is actually appropriate to face this issue. But facing the issue is not, it shouldn't be just to raise money or to find a way of getting funding to, you tackle the issue from the base, from the source. And tackling the issue is not to feed the problem, it's not to throw money at the problem, it's to avert that problem in the first place. And the problem majorly for West African countries is insecurity. We are not, Paul just mentioned something which I would like to touch on a bit. We talked about climate change.
Yes.
In the northern part of Nigeria, the Lake Chad basin. That Lake Chad basin used to be a, a source of fish. Yes, that was a huge source of fish. But climate change has dried up that Lake Chad basin.
But I'm thinking that there is a way to reclaim, even because fighting climate change requires a lot of enormous effort. But there's also a way of reclaiming certain things that you have lost through some initiative. So why is it difficult for West Africa, especially Nigeria also, to do that? And coming to this issue of insecurity once again, we understand also that they had problem in the Gulf of Guinea, that's maritime security,
Yes.
which they were able to deploy technology to tackle. So why is it now difficult for them to not to, the technological advancement they have made to transcend it to this other kind of insecurity like the Boko Haram, the ISWAP, the ICs, and the rest of them troubling part of West Africa, especially Nigeria. So why this difficulty of deploying technology that they have proved to be so successful in maritime, in fighting piracy at the Gulf of Guinea?
I would like to draw your attention to something. It was in the 1970s that the UN raised alarm that if certain things were not done in that Lake Chad basin, the water would dry up. There was that report, and I remember the last President Buhari during his first tenure was trying to address it, and a report was presented to him that this thing has been going on since maybe over the last 40, 50 years. But because of successive change of government, they may have lost, that place may have lost their attention, and they just allow it to go like that. And as a result of that, you have people migrating, because once there is no water in an area, people tend to migrate to where they find water. And that Lake Chad basin was actually a source of economic activity.
Yes,
but that source is actually drying up. And that's why remember there was a time this, I don't know the name of this fish, but it's that fish that looked like it has a zip at the back. Yes. There was a time we were having that in abundance from the north. Yes, that was from the Lake Chad basin. But that thing has dried up. I can't remember the last time I tasted that fish. Yes, and it's because that source is drying up. That is why you see, because of loss of vegetation and all of that, you see people migrating to the north and to the south. And that is that is part of the reason why we're having farmer herder clashes. Apart from that, this insecurity issue, it has to be tackled. If it, like I mentioned earlier, the government seems to be throwing money at some of these things, and it's not going to help. The thing needs to be tackled from the base. Empower people to work, empower people to produce. All of this, creating a refugee crisis is exacerbating the situation, because you are going to be feeding people who are supposed to be feeding
other people. Yes, because whatever investment you need to make, and this security is not tackled,
it's for nothing.
It's for nothing.
It's
and
for
so
nothing.
the difficulty in tackling the insecurity is what we're worried about.
By the way, who wants to produce food to go and give it to bandits? Because these guys are actually requesting that to go to your farm or to harvest, you have to give them a part of it as levy or tax. I don't know what it is.
Yes.
You have to give part of it to them. It's like monkey walk, babu chop. So who wants to be doing that? All of that is discouraging the motivation. It's a disincentive.
It's a real disincentive. And Paul actually has mentioned about the Maputo Declaration of 2003.
Exactly.
That actually is it mandated? What I would say has just mandated or advised.
It was just a recommendation. It seems like all the governments of West Africa, all the governments
of West
Africa,
seem
to have.
Of course, all the governments of West Africa, even the African countries in general, I don't think any one of them had committed even up to 5% of their GDP to agriculture. Maybe just a few.
No.
I'm trying to figure out any country that has done so. I don't think I have anyone on my record yet. So, recommending 10% is an ambitious move, which I think that if pursued vigorously, will actually help in ameliorating some of this, this thing that we have. But now, no African country has done so.
Yes, but take this into consideration.
Then, before you go into that, if I lose this there's also this issue of inflation disturbing the entire West African countries.
Yes.
Apart from the food crisis, there's inflation everywhere. It's just about on the average of 13% across West Africa. In Nigeria, for instance, we are having inflation at 16.8%, which is perhaps one of the highest in the whole of
Ghana is something around 27%.
Okay, which is one of the highest, at least in African and West Africa.
Yeah.
So you can see that there are a lot of issues, troubling this region, and they have to really have a collective, way of trying to resolve this and be more pragmatic, more practical, more detailed in the way they handle this matter.
It's linked to the same. It's linked partially to the same food issue.
Yes.
Yes. The fact that less is being produced and there are distribution bottlenecks.
Less is being produced in an increasing population.
In an increasing population, and then there are distribution bottlenecks. The supply chain disruption, and then distribution bottlenecks that we have been facing from time immemorial. I hope this is the time that the West will actually allow their farmers to produce more food. Do you know that the West, including in the United States of America and Europe, sometimes to make sure that the price of the prices of food items remain stable, not to have a surplus, they pay their farmers to sit down.
Yes,
they pay the farmers to do not to produce
less.
I
remember there was one case in the past where they actually went to dump food items on the sea, just to ensure that they don't cause surplus.
Yes, that is those are economic measures. But now that there is a demand, a huge demand, I hope they can allow their farmers to produce.
But the huge demand had to be regionalized now, because whatever challenges that we might have is an opportunity as well.
Yeah.
You can have very young, vibrant population in West Africa, and then you're looking for food to come from the West.
Yeah.
When you can always employ the energy, and the labor is here and it's also cheap. You can also employ it by making sure that the financial resources you're talking about mobilizing are invested into the lives of these young people, so that they can go into that land and be able to produce. So that we can talk about climate change without making effort to address it. We can talk about insecurity without also making effort to addressing this matter. And instead of waiting for them, for instance, even the COVID-19 you just mentioned, I don't think there's anywhere in Africa so far where they are producing these vaccines. So if we can, why don't we go into research? Yeah. And this research, these resources can actually come into research. It's the same boosting the economy of West Africa, because you can produce vaccines and sell, just like Cuba is doing. Remember during the COVID-19, what Cuba did? Cuban doctors, Cuban personnel actually were sent to as far as Italy.
Italy. Those guys are always there.
They're always
there.
So
always there. I remember during this Ebola situation in West Africa, they sent their doctors to West Africa,
and they are producing their own indigenous vaccines and drugs to treat this.
No, you can't take that.
Africa needs to wake up. West Africa needs to start research and development.
Just before we go, there is something I just wanted to mention before I forget. You talked about the Maputo Declaration being an ambitious project or an ambitious recommendation. It may have been an ambitious recommendation, but let's look at it from another angle, assuming it had been implemented. Right now, the budget for the military in Nigeria, because of the rising insecurity, you know that it has risen high up there.
Yes.
So some of the budget for the military has actually been taken from other sectors to beef up security, which is not a bad thing. But assuming those monies, the funding that's being pumped into security right now had been pumped into agriculture and education and research, do you think we would have had the problem we are having today? It may have been averted by simply engaging people.
Yes.
So with all of that, we can't. I think the Maputo recommendation was well thought out, but African countries did not implement it. Yeah, and that was that's part of the problems we are having today.
Well, if you're just joining us, we've been in the studio discussing the quest by ECOWAS to avert looming food crisis in West African sub-region. And the legislators of the ECOWAS Parliament are actually doing a great job of trying to raise finances with which they can actually invest in the lives of the people, especially in growing agriculture and other sectors of the West African economies, so that it will liberate us from this economic quagmire arising from COVID-19 pandemic, the disruptions of that pandemic, and of course, the increasing insecurity in the sub-region caused by ISWAP, that's the Islamic State in West Africa, Boko Haram, and other allied terrorist organizations that have unleashed ceaseless mayhem on West African countries. I've been in the studio with Kes Hammond doing justice to this particular topic, and we'll be joined by Paul Wadema virtually, and also talking about the same issue. We promise also that when next we come, we're going to engage you in another important topic. Stay blessed and goodbye.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.